Good afternoon, friends. Over the last 3 days, we have been talking about a new round of rumors in Jammu and Kashmir, and we talked about that for at least 3 days. And you may have noticed that my central message, something on which I laid emphasis in each of these broadcasts, was about a very strong, very important need of a very honest communication between the people and between the government and the people it governs. No, I'm already sick of the developments here. Already sick of talking about these rumors because the rumors are still not dying down. And the big development that a lot of people have been fearing or a lot of people have been are being scared of is not being seen anywhere around. So let's wait whether all these rumors end up as rumors, or if there is a development, what that development is about. Let's not get too much worried or panicked about that. But there is another part of the country which needs, as I said, emphasized, uh, uh, an honest communication between the government, between the system, and the people the system governs. So I'm talking about Lakshadweep. I'm sure that a lot of people across the country don't even know that where exactly Lakshadweep is, because India is such a large country, such a diverse country, that in most parts of the country people have no knowledge of the other corner of the country until something very big happens and that catches attention of the whole country. That's what exactly is happening with Lakshadweep at the moment. All of a sudden, there is a huge media coverage of some developments in Lakshadweep. There are newspaper articles and stories. There is a lot that's being discussed on the television channels, and the social media has a lot of reportage and conversation about the developments in Lakshadweep. And on the Twitter, there is a massive hashtag that's going on these days that's called Save Lakshadweep. So what exactly is happening in Lakshadweep? But before that, let's understand where exactly Lakshadweep is. Lakshadweep is basically an archipelago. It's a cluster of islands, cluster of some 35, 36 islands, out of which 10 or 12 islands have population and other islands don't have the population, but it's a cluster that forms together this archipelago. This is a union territory that's administered directly by the center, and it is situated at least 400 kilometers away from the last coast of this country, which means that the southwestern coast, it's away at least 400 kilometers from the southwestern coast in the Arabian Sea. So what's happening there? There's a confrontation between the Union Territory administration and the people of Lakshadweep. The Union Territory administration is headed by an administrator. So different Union Territories have different natures of the administration systems. For example, the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, they have two separate lieutenant governors. Similarly, the Union Territory of Chandigarh has an administrator. So the Union Territory of Lakshadweep also has an administrator. The current administrator there is Mr. Praful Koda Patel. He is a member of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and he comes from the state of Gujarat, where he has remained legislator for several times and was a minister for home under Mr. Narendra Modi when the current Prime Minister was the Chief Minister in Gujarat. So he was a Minister of State for Home between 2010 and 2012. Since then, he has also remained administrator of other union territories, like he was administrator of Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu. And ever since he has come to Lakshadweep, there is a spate of confrontation between his administration and the people. He joined there in the month of December 2020. Local people say that he is bringing in a slew of new laws, new regulations, new rules, which are shaking up the local cultural requirements, which are shaking up the comfort level of people, and which people say is completely against their cultural practices and the way they have been living their life for a very long time. The government on the other end is saying that we are not doing anything ulterior, we are not doing anything bad. What we are doing is that we are pushing through a development process to bring in more tourists, more industrial investments to Lakshadweep. Now, it's very important and very interesting to note that how much and what kind of intervention a small place like Lakshadweep really needs, and what scale of intervention is required for a protected area where everyone living there is a scheduled tribe, and scheduled tribe people have their own requirements, and the constitution gives a lot of protections and guarantees to them. Lakshadweep's total area is 32 square kilometers. So I am very poor in interpreting the numbers and the areas and the geography, etc. But I would like to try to explain to you that, for example, Jammu city has an area of 240 square kilometers. Srinagar city has an area of around 290 square kilometers, and this Lakshadweep, the whole union territory, is just 32 square kilometers. Its population is not more than 70,000. 70,000 people living on an area of 32 square kilometers means that this could be possibly the most dense spread of population anywhere in the country. So this is a city district, kind of city district, and the most densely populated district, or the most densely populated region of this country. So, if a place which is 400 kilometers away from rest of the country, and in between there is an ocean, so you can understand that their lifestyle and their culture is entirely unique from rest of the country. Mr. Koda has brought in certain legislation. Some of them have been approved and some of them are pending approval with the central government, because once he brings in some legislation, sort of legislations, I mean some regulatory orders, so they have to get approval of the central cabinet. Some of the legislations are like this, that he has opened the union territory, opened the archipelago for liquor establishment. So he is opening up for the liquor business there. So while has been for the last 4 decades, there has been a complete ban on the liquor consumption, because the people on the island, they don't want to consume liquor. And if there are visitors, if there are tourists, they say that respect our culture, respect this place. If we are not drinking, you should also not drink. The second law, the second rule is about ban on beef. That's of course a very controversial issue across the country, but people on this archipelago, they have been consuming. So that's another thing. They say that this is an interference in our culture. Another law is about acquisition of the land. Acquisition of land in the tribe. Acquisition of land, the proprietary land, owned land, is already a hugely controversial issue across the country. You are already aware of that. But more particularly in the tribal areas, it's a very sensitive issue, that for how far the government can go to acquire the land of the tribal people. So he has made a law that the government, wherever it requires for the development purposes, can acquire the land of the local people. And the fourth law is that the proposed law is the Anti-Gunda Act, as it is being called locally. But the fact of the matter is that the crime rate on the Lakshadweep archipelago is 0. There is absolutely no incident of crime that is reported anywhere. Some of the other features of Lakshadweep which are very important to understand is that per capita income of Lakshadweep is highest in the country, and the literacy level is 92%. So this should be one of the happiest, this should be one of the self-satisfying places in the country, which would not need a large-scale developmental intervention to tell people that we are bringing in a new thing for your development. Now, that is what is, bringing in a lot of confrontation. So there are allegations, because there is another feature about Lakshadweep which I wanted to mention toward the end of this broadcast, is that its population is 96% of the population is Muslim, and their culture is entirely different from the Muslims in rest of the country, and of the religious practices as well from the rest of the country and rest of the world as well, because it's an isolated place, so they have their own cultural practices. There is no history of any subversion or anything which should have brought such a large scale intervention. Now, the key thing is that while the people of Lakshadweep, they accuse the administrator, Mr. Praful Patel, of being communal in his approach to the people, I would like to give him the benefit of doubt. He may not be communal, but then this perception between the government and the people have to be removed, that while the government in its own approach, the government in its own statements has been saying that our intention is entirely to develop the region, to bring in more investment and to create economic opportunities for the local people. And the local people say that we don't need all this, we are already comfortable. And then there are people, commentators like us, who are not in the Lakshadweep, who are not with the government, who are not with the people. And because just looking at the population demographics and the government's the nature of laws, for example, opening liquor and shutting down the beef, etc., it looks like that this has communal elements. But generally, this gentleman, the administrator, Mr. Koda Patel, has a past experience in Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu also, that there were large-scale protests against him because he was telling people that I want to bring in more development and more economic opportunities. But the people said that this is disturbing our ecology, this is disturbing our culture, and this is disturbing our heritage as well, because he brought down a number of heritage buildings to pave way for new developmental projects. All said and done. So let's not fall for any rumors or accusations in any case. Let's give the government a benefit of doubt. And with this reiteration that government should have a sincere and honest communication with the people. But there is one important thing that all sides, the people and the government at the center, also needs to understand, that Lakshadweep is one of those places in the world which could be environmentally and climatically most challenged places, because the biodiversity, the ecology, the life on the archipelago is already threatened in a great measure. There have been these shifts in the climate change which have been bringing in a lot of problems for the people living there, and the reefs around the archipelago have already been affected in a great measure, that the scientists and the environmentalists, they say that the kind of damage, the scale of damage that has already happened on the island, this cluster, is something of this scale, that if no further climatic shift happens, it would require at least 30 years for the soil, for the ecology there to rebuild and stabilize, and which is obviously not going to happen, because every 2-3 months, or once or twice every year, there is a new tsunami, or there is a new climatic environmental challenge that is causing a lot of disturbances there. So I don't know. So by the time Mr. Praful Koda Patel is finished with bringing his developmental projects, finishing his developmental projects on the cluster of islands, whether we have some people drawing benefits of that there or not, because the scientists are suspecting that people of Lakshadweep, who are not more than 70,000 in number, could be India's first climatic refugees, because in a few years from now, if some important measures are not taken to preserve its ecology, in a few years from now, the island cluster could be entirely unlivable. So I think it's not just an honest communication between the government and the people. It needs also an intervention of the central government. It needs an intervention of the environmentalists to counsel and to